Hello, I'm Michael, and welcome to MD in the Shop. Like my father-in-law Dieter says, it's time to shut up and work.
Hey, it's been a little while since I've done a video for MD in the Shop, and well, it's been a busy summer. We spent a lot of time racing this summer and had a lot of issues racing this summer, which chewed up a lot of time keeping the car race ready, and so we go rounds. And we started off the season as we always do with great expectations. We spent a bunch of time in the spring getting things cleaned up and ready to rock and roll. And last year we made a bunch of changes to the motor. We had the heads rebuilt and the intake done and ported and polished and all that kind of good stuff. And it definitely had a really good impact on the horsepower. We figured we're probably another 100-ish horsepower, maybe 110, 120 horsepower. We didn't dyno it or test it or anything like that, but just based on the actual ETs that we were seeing with the car, we went from running like 870, 875, 880 if it was really hot and humid, to running down into the 850s. So definitely had a big impact on the performance, so it was definitely well worth the time and effort. However, the one thing that it did do is it pretty much screwed up the setup of the car. So we spent a lot of the summer going over the four-link settings and shock settings and all that kind of stuff. And it doesn't sound like much when you're going from, 880s to 850s. However, when you change the horsepower of the car by, almost 10%, that has a pretty big impact on the setup of the car. So we chased that a lot, and we cooked the transmission halfway through the season, and then that was a whole bunch of stuff because we had some challenges with the way the car was set up, getting the transmission in and out of the car. And I said, well, if we're into it, we might as well fix that too. So there's some fabrication going on there. Yeah, and then the last race of the year, we went out there, had a O-ring failure on the first day, so got put out by a 25-cent part. And then the next day, we got a screw in the slick as we were in the staging lane. So went to launch the car and had half the air pressure in the one tire, which made for a pretty interesting ride. And that was how we ended our season. So definitely not on the high note that we had of the year before, finishing fourth in points, which was amazing, to finishing like 19th in points. So definitely not our best outing. Still had a lot of fun, met some great people, got to hang with my buddy Tyler, who we sucked into the world of drag racing. So that was a lot of fun this year, watching him go out and learn the sport and actually do really, really well. Super proud of Tyler. He actually won an event, which in the street class, it's a pretty competitive class. So really awesome. Good job, Tyler. Yeah, so basically just doing all that and dealing with, family stuff and everything else. Now we've got the race car tucked away for the winter and moving on to winter projects. So going to get back onto the Silverado build. It's in the shop now, and spent a little bit of time last week just going over stuff and getting stuff cleaned up and put away, get the shop tidied up, and coming up with a really good next steps plan of action. So I'm excited to get back out there doing some more videos. Had a little bit of a break this week. Unfortunately got sick, so I spent the last couple of days chilling in my office and started going through cleaning up my computer files and whatnot, and found a whole bunch of really cool old pictures of cars that I've built over the years. So I thought, why not share that with everybody? Because it's who I am. It's how I got into this whole crazy car obsession. Really, it came from my father, so it's genetic. I had no choice. I'm gonna blame it 100% on my dad. So if my wife ever gets mad at me for this car obsession, it's all my dad's fault. And The very first car that I ever owned as my own vehicle was a 1985 S10 long box that I bought. It was an old work truck. I remember driving out there with my dad one night to a guy in Welland. He was selling it for the company that he was working for. Had a pile of kilometers on it, but it was in really decent shape. The bed of the truck got beat up pretty good. I think because it was a work truck, they kept it fairly clean, and because of that, the body on it was in pretty decent shape. Had a pile of miles on it. It had the was it 2.6 liter, 2.3 liter V6 in it, something like that, and it was tired. Had a 4-speed stick in it too, which was kind of cool. And I knew right away. I already had a motor that was built. My dad, being the cool guy that he is, had a mid-70s Chevelle station wagon. Because, of course, like if you're a car guy and you've got a family, you want to have a cool family car. So you couldn't just get the regular wagon that most other people got. It had to be like a Chevelle wagon. Had a 350 in it with a 350 trans, and drove the crap out of that car. And when it finally, the body just rotted off of it, but the drivetrain was still good. We drove it out behind the old shed, and then I pulled the motor and transmission out of it and rebuilt it. And then when I bought the S10, it was like, hey, well, why not put this ridiculous motor into this little tiny truck? So that's what we did back in, I think it was 1990, 91. I was around 18 years old. And that was my first car. So I'll show some pictures of this truck that we built, my dad and I, and man, we did everything to that truck. We put a Beltac lowering kit on it and dropped the thing about 2.5 inches, made it really fun to drive. Got hung up on every speed bump out there. And bucket seats came out of a Mustang that a friend of mine had, and put in a Alpine pull-out deck. That was the hot lick back in the day. That was a real cool guy because I had the pull-out Alpine CD changer deck. Had subwoofers in the back, gave you a good back massage when you got it thumping. Roll pan, all that really cool stuff. And it was a really fast truck. It was really fun. I cannot believe that I didn't get a lot more speeding tickets because it was really fun to drive. It definitely would light the tires without any issues. I did get it down the quarter mile, did a couple of Friday night testing tunes along the way, and it would run low 12s at a little over, around 110 mile an hour. And that was with the one wheel peel. It didn't even have the posi. I hadn't changed the rear end in it yet. So the first couple hundred feet were horrible, and it would definitely grab a bit of traction, and it would move pretty good in the top end. It was a lot of fun for my first ever built kind of vehicle. So that was the first one, and kind of a funny story as to why I got rid of that truck. It was costing me a lot of money in fuel, and this young guy came up to me. He just had an accident and settled with his insurance company, and they gave him a check. And through a friend of a friend, he showed up at my house one day, and he's like, "Oh man, I really love your truck, and I want to buy it. How much do you want to sell it for?" I'm like, "I don't know, just throw a number at me." He threw a number at me, and I was like, "Okay." I figured out how much money I kind of had into the truck at the time, and I was like, "Okay, I'll sell that and I'll build something else." So I only drove that truck for maybe a year and a half before I sold it. And I actually bought a posi. It was out of an old Crown Vic, I think, or something like that. And I was getting ready to put it in the truck, and I never actually got it in there. Would have really loved to have seen the posi in that truck to see how that would impact actually getting that thing down the quarter mile. I'm willing to bet it would have cracked into the high 11s. Anyway, so here's a couple of more pictures of the truck. It was really fun. I had a blast with it. I'll see if I can find some other pictures of the next truck that I built, because that was a really cool truck. The next one, there's always a story. And, the more I think about these stories, a lot of them involve my dad. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but for me, it's a really great thing. I love my dad, and I'm pretty blessed that I have a pretty cool guy who got me sucked into this and goes on these crazy adventures. So the next truck that we built was an 84 C10 stepside. And it was like the most basic of basic trucks. It didn't even come with a radio. So it was basically 4 wheels, an engine, and a 4-speed. Like, it was the most simple truck. And we bought it up at Queenston Shovels up on the mountain, and we went to go take a look at this thing. And we jump in it. So here I am driving this truck, and my dad's in there with the sales guy from the dealership, and it's got this really long shifter, and I'm like banging into this guy's knees trying to shift gears. And we drive about, I don't know, 2-3 minutes away from the dealership, and it starts to die because the alternator was pooched. So here we are, having to call back to the dealership, and then they had to come down and bring a boost thing and get the thing started up again, and we barely got it back to the dealership. Anyway, it was great because I was like, I don't know what's wrong with this thing. We're gonna knock a bunch of money off the price. And he's like, yeah, just take it, whatever. So I bought the truck for dirt cheap. So that'll be another video. I'll show you some pictures and some cool things I did on that one, because that was a build. It was different because that was more almost like a frame off kind of build that we did on that truck, whereas the S10, I didn't do any restoration kind of stuff. I just stuffed a big motor in it and drove it and had a blast. So anyways, hope you enjoyed the pictures in the video. I'll do a couple more of these with some of the crazy builds we've done over the years, because we've done some pretty awesome stuff. And I'll hopefully be getting back out to working on the truck and doing some videos in the next week or two. And my goal, I really, really am going to push hard to get this truck done over the winter. I really want to be driving this thing, have it on the road come spring. So I figure, I got about 5 or 6 months. In my opinion, we're about halfway there with this thing. I've already got a lot of the parts. Like, I got the motor, the trans, the tubing for the chassis, all the suspension stuff is there. So, we're about like 80% of the way there with the parts that I need. Now it's just a matter of getting the time. So I'm going to make a real good effort, get that thing put together so we can go have some fun in the spring, and I'll have some great videos for you this winter on getting that thing finished. So, like my father-in-law Dieter says, it's time to shut up and work.